Well, hello there, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Rocking Midlife podcast. And I'm very excited because today I'm joined by an incredible guest all the way from the other side of the world. And we connected recently after I was interviewed for her podcast series. So I'd like to introduce you to Susie Stanley. Welcome, Susie.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I was really looking forward to having this conversation with you.
Yeah, it was so lovely connecting. So Susie just has a business called Midlife Bliss and has been doing a recent summit where she was interviewing midlife women from all around the globe and releasing their wisdom. So that is really worth going and checking out. That link will be in the notes. But just reading Susie's bio here, she is a transformational and spiritual empowerment coach, helping women find their inner wisdom, cultivate self-love, and connect to the feminine so they can heal themselves and the planet. Sounds amazing. Tell us in your words, Susie, what do you do?
Yes, thank you for that. So actually my coaching business is called broadcastbliss.com. And then the series that I've been working on that you were a guest on is Midlife Magic.
Right.
So that was one project that I decided to really focus in on as far as women in their midlife. And that can mean a lot of different things. Because midlife, when I first started thinking about, focusing on that demographic, I started doing some research and I Googled, and Google actually defines midlife as 35 to 55, which
wow.
I was pretty surprised because I don't think of women in their 30s as midlife. So that's interesting.
I don't think they do either. Usually we kind of think about midlife around the 40 mark, don't we? And even then it's like, am I there? Am I really there?
Yeah, but I think there's two things to do with that. One is it's because in the past, midlife has had sort of this negative connotation almost, right?
Yeah.
So women, they really feel sort of a rub or an edge when they get lumped into that category. But what I'm wanting to do, and I know what you're doing and so many of the other women that we connect with, what we're doing is redefining what midlife means and the connotation and the energy surrounding that. Because what I have found is that midlife is actually the most beautiful time in my life, and it's been the most magical, and it's been the most rewarding, and it's been the best. It literally has been the best time of my life. And so I think if we can get that message out there and share that with everyone, then we can rewrite, get rid of the stigma and rewrite what it means. When people are referring to midlife, we can start to refer to it, and when we say those words, feel empowered and to feel like we're now graduating into this beautiful time and this space of power and getting to really integrate all the lessons that we've learned through the first part of our life. So that's been my goal with the summit that you were on.
Yeah. I really love that, though. I love how you're saying graduating into. That's so cool. It's not something that we have to go through, but it's something that we get to go through and graduate into. And I love that. I love that take on it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like when you go through all of this schooling and all this education, and then it culminates in graduating, and now you get to put it all you get to integrate it and you get to apply it all, just like when you graduate from university, right? So that's how it's kind of been for me. Not to say that it's been easy, or not to say that there hasn't been bumps along the road and challenges and some really, really big things that, depending how you frame it, it could be looked at from the outside, depending on, your worldview and how you look at things that happen in our lives. It could look as, very traumatic and very challenging is probably the best word, right? But I mean, and even through those challenges, I found that the things that were the hardest ended up being the biggest gifts, right?
Yeah. So when I was reading your background a little bit, you've been through some major changes, haven't you, in your home life and your personal life at midlife? Do you mind sharing a few of those and what effect they've had on you now?
Yeah, no, I don't mind sharing it all. I feel like that's, as women, that's our power, is in our storytelling.
Yeah.
And sharing our experiences, right? So I think, and it's such a big part of who I am and how I've come to be, in the place that I'm at. And it's part of my journey, right? So I love, and I find too, when I'm talking to other women, that is very, it ends up being how I can relate to them and how I can see myself in them is when they share their personal stories and they share the things that might not be easy to talk about. So I definitely love sharing these parts. So I'll give you sort of the summary.
Reader's Digest condensed book version.
Exactly. Yeah. You know what? I used to love Reader's Digest, by the way. Whenever we go to the doctor's office, they would have like the little ones. I don't know if they did in Australia where you were growing up, but in Canada where I grew up, those were my favorite ones to read. Okay. So basically I was living a very nice life. And from the outside, it was a very good life. I was married. I had my daughter. We lived in a great neighborhood. We lived in the suburbs. Everything should have been great. We had everything, all of the standards that people put on in the material world. I should have been ecstatic. I should have been happy. I should have been like floating through life, right? But as most people have come to learn that if you don't have, if your soul is not aligned with your life, then you can have all of the things, all the material things in the world, and it's just never ever going to be enough. So I was married to a man who. He was a great father. He was a great provider. He was a good person doing all the right things. We were both doing all the right things. Our heart was in the right place. Our intentions were good. And we were both trying to make the best life for ourselves and for our daughter. But just no matter how hard we tried to, make it be the life that we wanted, there was just something missing. And so we were kind of both of us going through the motions. And then, unfortunately, there was a big tragedy and a catalyst in my life, which a lot of times I'm finding from talking to other women's story, that seems to be what happens, is something big will happen that really forces you to look at your life in a way that you didn't have to before. You could kind of continue to go through the motions, and then something happens and you just can't pretend anymore. You can't go with the status quo. So that big event for me was my younger brother, who was 9 years younger than me. At 30 years old, he was in a tragic workplace accident on a construction site.
Oh, how awful.
Yeah, he was 30 years old with a 2-year-old daughter. And he went to work that morning and he just never came home. And so that was a huge wake-up call for me. There's a lot of layers to that. One of them being, I'll just touch on real quick, was that he was actually in ICU for 5 days on life support. And so at least the good news is that we and our whole entire family, we all flew in from all the different parts that we were, and we got to spend those 5 days with him next to his bedside. He never regained consciousness, but at least we had that, we had that time
to say goodbye. Yeah.
Exactly. And we got to make our peace, and we all got to say, do whatever that we needed to do. And I feel like during those 5 days, that was a very spiritual process for me as well, coming to terms with all life and death and all these things. So that being said, I came home. Over the next course of the next year or so, things in my life, all of a sudden I saw things with new eyes, and I saw, that I was assuming that I had another 40 or 50 years left in my life, and that wasn't a given anymore. So all of a sudden I saw things with new eyes, and I started to realize that this everyday life that I was living, that I started to see what was missing. And I started to see, I looked at my daughter and I saw her in a way, is this what I wanted to model for her? Is this the life that I wanted to model for her? Is this the marriage that I wanted to model for her? Is this the motherhood, the image of motherhood that I wanted to model for her? And every answer that when I was, asking myself those questions, I realized that the answer kept coming back as no. And
that's
so I started.
Wow. So what do you do with that?
Exactly. Right. And so I sought out a therapist, and I found a really good therapist, and I started exploring all those questions. And now what do I do? And just really digging in and exploring. And then, so I realized that the answer was that I needed to create the life that I actually wanted instead of just living the default life that I was living. And that's a scary thing. It's very scary to go from a life of comfort to the unknown, where there's no guarantees. There's no, you just absolutely, it's a big giant question mark, and you have no idea. I didn't know if I was going to fall on my face. I didn't know if I was going to regret every single decision that I was making. I didn't know if I was going to, just all of a sudden be destitute and homeless. Like there were so many, all the fears that creep up. it's the worst case scenario. We always imagine that it's going to be way worse than it actually is, right? And so, so then I just started the process of slowly dismantling everything that I had known and then recreating it anew. So
goodness, that's crazy. So over what period of time did you kind of do this major life change? Well, your complete life change.
Yeah, well, it wasn't immediate. We sort of, we started the conversations between my husband and I, and we started the conversation of, are we really happy? What do we want to create for our daughter? What does our future look like? And so we came to the decision that we were going to separate. And so that was slow. And luckily for me, he was great as far as it was very amicable, and we both were very committed to making it a smooth process. So I'm so lucky. Not everybody is that lucky, right? But it was, so then we separated. We took it nice and easy. We sold our home. We separated all our assets. I moved out, he moved out. And then we slowly started to build a co-parenting relationship. And I was a homeschooling mom at the time. So then we also made the transition of putting my daughter into school. Yeah. And so everything changed. Every single thing changed. And so how I got to where I am at now is I needed to embark on a new career. I'd been a stay-at-home mom, a homeschooling mom for 12 years, 14 years. And so the one thing that was really quick and easy for me was jumping into real estate. The real estate was booming in our area, and it required, I think it was 6 weeks of school. It didn't, it was fairly, it was a low threshold to jump into that career. I mean, it was a lot of studying in a short amount of time. And so I got into that and I really enjoyed it. It seemed like a really natural fit for me. I've always loved everything to do with nesting and to do with the home and decorating and staging homes and the values of homes and architecture and construction. It was a very natural fit for me. But I found that in real estate, it has a lot to do with sales. Yeah. And the one thing that I didn't have a lot of experience in was sales. And so they would send us to a lot of these seminars and workshops, and all to do with sales. And with sales comes mindset. And so they would talk a lot about personal development and mindset to get you into the right mindset so that you could be a good salesperson. And that is where I just lit up when I started to learn about all these things, mindset and, just how learning about yourself. That's when, all the tingles started and all the sparks started flying for me. I was like, see, this is what lights me up. And this is what really talks my language, and it really fires me up and gets me energized. And so the more I would dig into that, the more I realized that the real estate side of it it wasn't as exciting, whereas the personal development side of it really was. So I started really jumping into that world and pursuing that, taking courses and reading books and listening to podcasts, and just immersed myself in all things personal development and learning about myself and therapy and just listening. I found that the biggest thing for me was listening to women who had been through what I had been through, right? That's for us, and for me especially, that really, I think it's because in history, all of human history, that's how we learned from one another, was the wisdom that got passed down from our elders and from the other women in communities and villages.
Very much so.
Yeah. And so that's how I got into learning about that. And then it was just sort of a natural evolution from there, that the more you learn, then all of a sudden you realize all of this wisdom that you have now accumulated, that then when you start talking to other women, you realize that you can now pass that information on to them. And then so you realize it's not like in like business structure and a lot of the masculine structures of our world, where there's this hierarchy of top down, and it's like, listen to the authority because they know best, and you just they tell you how it is and you follow. Whereas I feel in the feminine, it's more like a round circle community of everyone sharing their wisdom collaboratively. And so, or even if it's in like a long line where you just kind of pass it down to the next one, it's not like a hierarchical, it's like side by side and you pass it down along the chain.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. So you've made this gradual evolution, really, haven't you, which has brought you to working with women mainly now, and through connection and coaching, and I just love how your own journey, which is kind of like mine, because I think I told you, I homeschooled for 6 years and then reinvented, and that's where everything started for me, into this midlife space. So I love what you're doing now with women where you're talking about they don't have to replicate masculine energy in how they act, in how they in their lives. Explain a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, that's what I was finding is that on a day-to-day basis, like it's good to have structure. Like we definitely need a balance. I think it's anytime you're sort of leaning completely one way or the other, then it's going to be out of balance, right?
Yeah.
But I think that because the way that I grew up and in the world in our modern society, we're told that it's the hustle, it's the go get 'em, and at all costs, you just have to like go, 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 go. You have to win, 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 win. You have to be at the top. You have to compete, and all those things. And so I was kind of especially when I jumped into real estate, that's a lot of that same energy. It's very competitive. It's very,
hashtag grinding today or hustling today. Yeah, I know that.
Absolutely, right. And so I jumped into that, and I definitely, I could definitely relate because I was very in a lot of masculine energy my whole life because I was always wanting to do my best and to get, validation from the world and get achievements and just try and, get the good grades and just kind of, live within the game that I was living in, play the game of the society I was in, right? So, that's just how we do it a lot of times. And then it was through this personal development journey that I started on that I realized I started to hear the concept of the masculine and the feminine, because I had always thought in the past that masculine and feminine were just male and female. Mm-hmm. And that it also just meant like that men were strong and women were soft and weak. You know? And so I would always equate when people would say feminine, I would just think, oh, like a shrinking violet or someone who wasn't strong or independent. And so I had put a negative connotation on the word feminine. Yeah. And so
I think a lot of people do exactly down those lines that you've just described. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it wasn't until I really started following strong women and I started really digging into and hearing that feminine described in a completely different way, in an empowered way, in a fierce way, in a way where we're fully in our power. And that just was a game changer for me. And so it's even, I mentioned this on one of my interviews, that I rejected the color pink my whole life because I always had associated pink with weakness and then it was like, oh, she's just a little princess. And, and that's, so to me, I was just, and then now that I've been in, been doing all this empowerment work, I realized I get to reclaim that. And as you can see,
your branding is all pink, isn't it?
I love pink because I got to rewrite. And I think that's what we do in midlife. That's been my journey. And that's what I'm seeing in so many other women, is that we get to rewrite the labels. We get to rewrite the stories and the conditioning, and we get to take that back and we get to empower ourselves and empower each other.
I think that's great. I love it. That's so cool about pink. And, we are so in tune because I'm the same. I've avoided pink like the plague, because it represented weakness and, frilly stuff and flowers and daisies when I wanted to be out, winning the world and transforming the world. And
right? I know, it's crazy. It's so funny. And I love that this is like a blossoming and an unfolding that seems to be happening with so many of us. It's like, it's just that it's a theme. It's a, it seems to be this, it's like across the board. I keep hearing the same thing. The more women I talk to, the more I realize that all of our stories, we're kind of all discovering, relearning all the same thing. It just has different details. But the underlying themes of all of our journeys, they seem to have, at its core, it seems to have all of the same recurring themes.
Yeah, I think so. So one of the points that you gave me that you really abide by is trusting your own wisdom. So tell us a little bit more about that. And is that something that you really emphasize with your coaching work with other women?
Absolutely. And that's been, that was the major underlying theme of my online interview series that I did as well, was really learning to trust that, because that's what the process of my whole, my years up until when my brother died, I had that little quiet voice inside of me that knew that there was more to life and knew that there was a calling and knew that there was something in there that was wanting to come out and wanting to be recognized and wanting to be heard. But because it was so quiet and I hadn't learned to listen to that voice or trust that voice, that even when she would come up, I would kind of dismiss it and push it down, because that's what we learn a lot of times as girls too in the world. Because even when we say things sometimes growing up, then our parents sometimes will be like, oh no, they just kind of dismiss that and push it to the side. So we learned to do that ourselves. And it wasn't until, something big happened that voice started to get really strong. And then once I started to listen to it, it's a journey. It's not like all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're like, I'm just going to listen to that voice, So what happens is something little will happen. And just like when I realized that, this marriage that I was in, it was not enabling both of us to live our best lives. And when I finally spoke that truth and started putting that into motion, that was the very first step of listening to that voice and trusting it and following through on it. And then once I did that, I started to see what happened when I actually listened to that voice and did something about it. And then that gave me the courage and the trust and the faith to do the next one. So the next one on the path was, okay, now I can do this. And then when that turned out good, and good is always relative, but when that turned out, when it worked, thank you, when it worked, and when it gave me so many more valuable lessons and opened up so many other things, then it gave me even more trust. So the more trust I had more faith to do the next thing. And then, so it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And so that's the one piece that I always want women to go away with whenever they hear my story and whenever I coach with them, is to always trust that intuition, because that knowing knows everything that you need to know. And I was always looking externally for the answers. I was always looking it's good to have mentors and coaches. That's not what I'm saying. It's really important but the important role of a good coach or a therapist is to mirror back to you your own wisdom, because it's not like they know. So. It's not like they know what you need. It's to elicit and to create a space for you.
Pull that out of you, basically, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. That's cool. And it's interesting because we bonded over what I said on your interview series about it being never too late to start over, to have a fresh start, to go out and create your life. Tell us a little bit more about how that's your philosophy as well.
Yeah.
So
it's absolutely it's so true. You know it, I know it, and so many women that I talk to. It's funny because before it starts unfolding, it kind of feels like you're on this trajectory and you can't imagine anything other than the trajectory that you're on, right? Yeah. Anything other than that just seems so outside possibilities, and it just seems so like
you've missed that bus. It's all, you've missed that. Yeah.
Like it's too
stuck with where you're going now.
And you think, and those thoughts come up like, oh, if only I would have, in my 20s would have made this decision, or even like 5 years ago or 10 years ago, like if I would have done it then that would have been, I could have done it. But I talk to women after women after women that the best decisions that they made and the best changes that they made were in their midlife, because it's literally the most ripe and fertile time to make those choices and make those decisions and make those changes and shifts, because we now have all of the wisdom that we've accumulated over our whole life, the trial and the error. And, it's the best time in life to actually make a difference, because we also don't have a lot of the things and the obligations that we had when we were younger. Yeah. So our kids are not little, so they don't require as much attention. We sometimes have, not everyone, but sometimes you have some savings, or you have some equity in your house, or maybe if you're working part-time, or maybe if you're staying at home, if you're a stay-at-home mom and now your obligations have gotten less, or even if you're now a divorced woman and you're a single woman, there's so much opportunity that we can use, and we can apply our life skills, right? Yeah. Like it's the perfect time. And I think the only thing that makes the difference between someone who can make a big shift and a giant life change in midlife. The only difference between one woman and another is the one who believes it and the one who trusts that she can. There's literally no other difference, because I've watched women who literally had nothing. They had $0. They were in debt. They went from literally looking like they were on the brink of homelessness to now making hundreds of thousands of dollars. And not that money is the money is not the yardstick, right? I'm just giving that as an example because it shows that they can completely transform where they're at. Well,
there had to be some growth there for them to be able to step into that after not earning that amount of money. So exactly. That's phenomenal. I totally agree, because I've seen so many women dealing with similar issues at midlife, all of this self-doubt and lack of belief and all this business. But some will stay in it and some won't. Some will really transform. And it comes back to that it's like self-efficacy, that I can do it. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I know that I can. And if they had that.
Yeah. And not needing to know, this is another point that I wanted to make, was we don't need to know. I wish somebody had told me this in the beginning. Like, if I could go back and tell myself, this is what I would tell myself, is that you don't need to see. You don't have to have a grand vision. I mean, you can there are plenty of women who do have a grand vision, but it's not a requirement. You don't have to see the end result in order to take that first step. Yeah. And so you don't have to have it all figured out. You just need to take that one step. If you can have the faith to have that first step, then once you've taken that first step, then all you need is the faith for that next step. And then the next step. You just take it one step at a time.
Oh, we talk the same language. Love it, love it. Yes, yes.
Yeah, and there's a saying that I really love that says, action brings clarity. Yeah. And that is so true, because what I had been doing a lot in my life was I was waiting for the clarity in order to take the action. And then the catch-22 is that if you're waiting around for the clarity, it's never going to come. You're going to be waiting forever, and you're never going to take any action. You're going to be stuck in procrastination. You're going to be in analysis paralysis. So the key is, the big mindset shift for me was, take the action, and then the clarity comes. And then once you start doing it in that order, then it's like all these light bulbs start going off, and you're like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have realized this how many years ago. Yeah. And and then everything starts everything starts falling into place.
That's perfect. That is so similar to my own operating mode. One thing I used to say to the kids, I'm trying to think of how you say it. You can't move a ship in the harbour or something like that. It's actually got to be moving, and then you can change direction, and then you can tweak things according to where you're going. And the analysis. Was it paralysis by analysis or the other way around? Sorry, I'm really not with it here today. But
there's a couple of different ways to say it, but it means the same thing, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I know that that's probably been one of my biggest issues myself, because I am someone who likes to analyze information. I'm an information junkie. I like to read. I like to research. I don't know if I've told you, but I've told other people I'm a course junkie. I've got so many incompleted courses that I just keep buying because it looks so interesting. Oh, good. Kindred spirit. And it's so easy to just keep thinking, I can't do that until I just find out a bit more. If I just, I think this person might have the answer that I'm actually looking for, and then I can do that. And it's learning to be brave, and still, like you said, still listening to mentors and getting some input and everything. But at the end of the day, actually taking action and believing that you are capable of doing that on your own. You can make that decision. You don't have to wait for the mentor's permission. You can actually just get going. And
exactly.
That was a huge one for me, and I think for a lot of other women too.
I think most women that I talk to as well. And I think another piece of that to go along with it is perfectionism. I was stuck in so much perfectionism all the time. I thought I had to do everything perfectly. So I needed to figure out and know exactly how to do every single little piece of everything I was trying to accomplish. And if I didn't know a little piece of it, it's like, oh, I'm not ready yet. I have to be. And it's not even like in my head. I wasn't even necessarily thinking the word perfect. Yeah, I was just thinking I need to know it all. Like I just need to be I need to have it all my ducks in a row, and because I didn't want to look bad, or I didn't want to, and I realized that it wasn't until I was letting go of that perfectionism that's when things started to really happen for me. And it was like, I like to say it like this, I needed to get out of my own way.
Yeah.
Because I was the only one who was standing in my way. It wasn't all these imagined obstacles. It was myself I was stopping myself.
Well, I mean, that's exactly what happened with this podcast. I've wanted to do this Rocking Midlife podcast for 2-3 years now, and I kept putting off because I made it out to be so big and it had to be perfect, and I have to have perfect editing and perfect sound, and I don't have a proper studio, gosh, so therefore I can't, and it needs to be scripted, and then I should be doing, all these different things that I see other people are doing, and all power to them. But it became such a block for me until I decided, hang on, let's put it out there. These are just conversations. They're not formally scripted. And that took the pressure off me having to make this thing perfect. And then I started actually doing it. And now, I love it. We're getting these conversations out, which is what I always wanted to do. But
exactly.
If I hadn't got out of my own way, I'd still be sitting around into the 3 or 4 year mark working out how to make an absolute perfect scripted, immaculate podcast.
That's so true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had the same process happening with my interview series. Is that I was like trying to get the perfect lighting and the perfect sound and the perfect angles and like all of this stuff. But then I put myself on a timeline and I just started doing it, even though it wasn't perfect. And then when I watched the very first couple of interviews to the very last few interviews over the span of, I think it took me about a couple of months to get all of them recorded. And there was such a huge difference. And I wouldn't have got to the end point if I hadn't have started where I was, because that's how you get to the end point is by going through the trial and error in the beginning and just doing it anyways. Right. Yeah. And so you can look back and you can say, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I can't believe that I looked like that, or that the quality of it was that terrible. But the part that I always try and remember is that I wouldn't be at the end point unless I started at the beginning point.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's so important for us to have grace and compassion for ourselves.
Yes. We're good at giving it to other people, aren't we? But for ourselves, that's...
So true. We give it away like candy to everyone else. Like it's just a given. And then when we turn around on ourselves, it's like all of a sudden, oh no, well, am I allowed to give myself that same, grace and compassion? And it's more important, I think, for ourselves than other people because we're our worst own critics, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. We really are. And ultimately, like you said, we're the ones that are going to hold ourselves back. So, this has just been fabulous. I mean, I knew when we connected for your interview a while ago that there was real synergy there, and I just love that we're talking so much of the same language, and that's what I love about. I'd like to go off on tangents. I was talking online a little while ago, about how we've all been locked down in our homes and we can't travel and all that business. But I'm so glad we get to do this in an era of technology where we can all still connect. And, I can connect with someone I haven't met on the other side of the world and we're talking the same language. And I just love technology. Just want to say that.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. I've been having these conversations with other women as well, and that we live in such a time that we have everything we need at our fingertips, right? And I feel like this is why the feminine energy around the world and women connecting in community with one another, I think that's why the timing of it is happening right now in our world, because it's the first time in the time of human modern history that we've had these technology and these tools to connect as women. Yeah. And so that's what women do. We naturally connect with one another. And so that's what we're doing. It's just been this organic
just reaching out and
exactly. And so I love it.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I'm going to be listing all of the places where people can find Susie and see your website, so that all of those links will be in the show notes. Do you have one final thought that you'd like to let us? What do you think of rocking midlife? How would you sum that up in a nutshell? How do you rock your midlife, girl?
I would say just following your own soul's calling and trusting, just really, really trusting your own wisdom and trusting that voice inside that says there is more and that you'll be okay. And even if you don't know exactly what it's going to look like, everything is going to be okay. And if you just trust yourself, that's the only person that you need to trust.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Susie. And like I said, everybody, please subscribe, leave a great review, and so other people can find this podcast and be encouraged to rock their midlives. And remember, it's never too late to have a new beginning in life. Thank you.
Bye.